The writer Norman Mailer once said that the reason he did not want to teach on a campus is because he thought that the stakes were low and that the environment was vicious. All of the professors trying to outshine the other professors. This next gentleman must have found a lot of beauty on a college campus because he has dedicated a large part of his life to teaching students about the craft of writing. Anthony Doerr is the 2015 Dayton Literary Peace Prize runner-up in fiction for All the Light You Cannot See. Born and raised in Cleveland, Ohio, he is the author of 5 books: the story collections The Shell Collector and Memory Wall, the memoir 4 Seasons in Rome, and the novels About Grace and, once again, All the Light You Cannot See, which won the 2015 Pulitzer Prize for Fiction and the 2015 Andrew Carnegie Medal for Excellence in Fiction. His fiction has been translated into over 40 languages and won prizes including the Rome Prize, the New York Public Library's Young Lions Award, the Barnes & Noble Discover Award, the National Magazine Award, a Guggenheim Fellowship, and the Story Prize. He's also a regular contributor to Condé Nast Traveler. He lives in Boise, Idaho, with his wife and sons. Ladies and gentlemen, the very gifted Anthony Doerr.
Thanks for clapping. Will's amazing. Will didn't even find out he had to do this till Friday. He's incredible. It's not easy. He's really great. My hands are shaking after listening to Susan. I missed last year because I had been traveling so much and it was Halloween and I wanted to see my kids trick or treat. But I'm so grateful that I came this year, not only to get to introduce James, but to be around all of you. I've had the best table mates the past 2 nights. Sarah, Leo, met some great people. And I feel like the last 12 days have been very emotional for me and my family. And I feel like I have a reminder that storytelling is one of the most important things that we can be doing, especially in the years to come. Delicious Foods is a novel about Darlene and Nat, young, in love, and in Louisiana, working to positively affect the world. Then Nat is murdered in a horrific hate crime, and the ensuing pain leads Darlene to depression, drugs, the streets of Houston, and eventually in an incredible scene that is somehow both terrifying and hilarious, I promise, to a crack-smoke-filled van where Darlene is enticed into signing a contract that enslaves her to a fruit company called Delicious Foods. Meanwhile, Darlene and Nat's young son, Eddie, is left all alone in Houston at 12 years old. And as the novel progresses, we watch him work desperately and ingeniously to locate and then free his mother. There's one more character I have to explain to know about, and that's Scotty. And the thing to know about Scotty is that he's not human. Scotty is the crack cocaine twisting recurrently through Darlene's bloodstream. Scotty is a potent and poetic villain. He's one of the narrators in the novel. He's as charming as the devil himself. And what he helps deliver is a propulsive, mythic novel written with astonishing range. I won't be the only person at this microphone tonight to argue that the road to peace travels through a place called empathy. Read delicious foods and you'll increase your feelings for those among us who suffer from addiction. You'll re-remember how a lack of respect for bodies of color is institutionalized in our country. You'll gain a more nuanced understanding of what it must feel like to be enslaved, the constant weighing of, quote, the crazy danger of running against the safe misery of staying. And you'll pay more careful attention to the people who picked and prepared and served and cleared away your food tonight. You'll also get to read the prose of a virtuosic and super exciting American writer. We have been wingmen together tonight. It's been great fun. It's been one of the pleasures of my whole year. Ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of the Dayton Literary Peace Prize, it's my honor to present the runner-up for this year's 2016 Award in Fiction to James Hannaham.
All right, here we go. Thank you so much for that introduction, Anthony, and thank you to everybody who's put this whole thing together, from Sharon on down, or up, or sideways. Let's think of this in more sort of horizontal terms, because I'm glad to hear that so much about peace and empathy is being mentioned tonight, because that will make my remarks make some sense at all. But before I begin my remarks, I'd like to thank the judges of the Dayton Literary Peace Prize and the organizers for selecting my work for this incredible honor. It's amazing to me that the panelists read Delicious Foods, I can't even pronounce the name of my novel, I'm so verklempt. It's amazing to me that the panelists read Delicious Foods, a novel so full of unrest, modern slavery, addiction, racial discrimination, graphic violence, and decided that it deserved a major prize focused on peace. But I'm very grateful that they saw through the mayhem to one of the book's core messages, which is that the abuse of power destroys people at every level of the exchange. Speaking of the abuse of power, I thought that I would spend my cultural capital tonight by describing something I recently noticed about the work of the social psychologist Stanley Milgram, whose work has had a strong influence on my thinking about human nature, and whose specter has haunted my writing since I was in college, and I lived across the quad from the building where he conducted his most famous experiment, and I also took literature and English courses there as an undergraduate. Milgram was born in 1933 in the Bronx, as I was several decades later. In his most famous experiment, sometimes referred to as the Milgram experiment, although he conducted many others, a subject who thinks that he or she is participating in a study about memory and punishment is brought into a room by an authority figure given the title of a teacher. The teacher will supposedly be testing a so-called learner's aptitude for memorization during a word association game, already the link with literature. But the learner is actually an actor. The authority figure explains that whenever the learner gets an answer wrong, the teacher will administer electric shocks to the learner in increasing dosages from 15 to 450 volts. If the subject makes any effort to end the proceedings, the authority figure makes the following statements in order. Please continue. The experiment requires that you continue. It is absolutely essential that you continue. You have no other choice. You must go on. There are two terms under which the experiment can end. The test ceases if the teacher still wants to stop after the authority figure makes all four of those statements, or if the teacher administers the maximum dosage of 450 volts to the learner 3 times, which would, of course, kill that person 3 times. In the first version, or condition of the experiment, Milgram found that 65% of the teachers would have administered lethal shocks to the stranger in the booth. This oft-quoted statistic has come to stand in for some essential evil in mankind, but of course it doesn't tell the whole story. Milgram created many different conditions of the experiment. In condition 4, the learner stays in the room and the teacher has to physically put the learner's hand on the electrical plate, him or herself. In that version, the percentage who went all the way dropped by half. In condition 12, the learner demands to be shocked, and in that case, none of the subjects ever administered a lethal shock. Nor did they do so in condition 15, when 2 authority figures publicly disagreed about whether or not to continue the experiment. Mostly, though, it's utterly heartbreaking in the documentary Milgram made about his experiment to see so many people try so hard to do the right thing, argue vigorously with the authority figure, and then suddenly cave in and go well beyond the point where they might have killed someone. But what I want to point out tonight is more basic. Milgram's initial study included 18 different conditions, each consisting of 40 participants. That's 720 people. The most chilling statistic for me, although it only gets an asterisk in his study, is that after hearing this setup, out of those 720 people, only 2 ever declined to participate at all. The ingenuity of the experiment's specifics should not be overlooked. Imagine for a moment that instead of electrical shocks, Milgram had displayed a series of knives, each larger than the last, and said to the teacher, "You're going to stab the learner every time he gets an answer wrong." I imagine that the results would be quite different. As Milgram himself puts it in the introduction to his book, a reader's initial reaction to the experiment may be to wonder why anyone in his right mind would administer even the first shocks. Would he not simply refuse and walk out of the laboratory? But the fact is that no one ever does. The 2 who walked out were both from condition 10, in which Milgram held the experiment in a storefront in Bridgeport, rather than on the intimidating campus of Yale University. The fact that 718 people agreed to hurt a stranger based on an obedience to authority that began even before the experiment tells me more than I need to know about human nature. We are all aware of how easy it is to be cruel to people we perceive to be at a distance from us in some way. Just the mention of military drones should call that fact to mind. But what we don't see as often, through our own conception of ourselves as nice people, is how complicit we already are in the suffering of others, how difficult it is to be like those 2 people who walked out of condition 10. This is one thing I want to remind people of through the work that I do and the stories that I tell and the characters whose lives I wish to illuminate. Hopefully, I can prevent the massive failures of empathy that we're seeing erupt all over our country at the moment. The time to stop cruelty is not the moment after you've killed someone. It's not the moment when you have administered a non-lethal shock. It's when you realize that the terms you've been handed by authority figures are unjust, that they are harmful to others even in the smallest ways, and that the only humane choice is to reject them. In other words, you have other choices. You don't have to go on. Thank you very much.